Chromatography is used in everything from forensic testing to testing food quality, even in the pharmaceutical industry, and so much more. It's extremely important in my life and unbelievably complicated and confusing if you don't know the basics. So this is the basics of chromatography. At the very end of the video, I will post an exam summary for those of you who need it. Let's do this. First off, what is chromatography? Definition: chromatography, a technique for the separation of mixtures by passing the mixture in solution or suspension through a medium in which the substances that make up the mixture move at different rates. To simplify, you take a mixture and depending on the type of chromatography, the mixture can either be in the form of a liquid or a gas. And also, depending on the type of chromatography, the substance that the mixture travels through can either be a liquid or a solid. For example, in paper chromatography, often what happens is, the best example I have is often they take ink, like ink from a pen, and that's a liquid. And then they put it literally on a form of chromatography paper and make it just a little bit wet and allow the ink to travel down the chromatography paper. Your chromatography paper, that's your solid substance that the mixture is moving through. Your mixture is a liquid, and it separates as you go along. You can see if you separate black ink. I'll actually link to a video where they do paper chromatography in the description below so you guys can see exactly all the different colors that it separates into. The way that I like to view chromatography is that each substance that makes up the mixture, each component that makes up the mixture, they're all in a race because each component travels at a different rate or speed. Some are slower and some are faster. It's this differing mobility, the different speeds at which the components that make up a mixture travel, that makes up the basis of the separation of a mixture in chromatography, regardless of the type of chromatography. Each chromatography functions, at the end of the day, the basics are the basics. Okay, now chromatography has two phases. Regardless of the type of chromatography, it will have these two phases, and that is stationary phase and mobile phase. Definitions. Stationary phase in chromatography is the substances that selectively retards the flow of the sample, affecting the separation of the sample. Mobile phase, on the other hand, is the portion of the system in which the mixture to be separated moves. Generally, the mixture itself is actually the mobile phase, and the mobile phase usually travels either over or through the stationary phase. The stationary phase is that solid or liquid substance in which the mixture, which is the mobile phase, travels through. I hope that's clear. If it's not clear, please ask questions in the comment section. The more questions you ask, the more I can clarify for you guys what's happening. Alright, what determines the rate at which or the speed at which the components that make up a mixture travel in chromatography? Okay, so it's the stationary phase itself that determines the rate at which the components that make up a mixture travel. Okay, so what happens is the stationary phase and the components of a mixture interact with each other, which is the type of interaction is determined by the type of chromatography. So what happens is the more strongly a component in a mixture interacts with the stationary phase, that means that component that interacts very strongly will travel very slowly. So that component is going to be left behind. And then the components of a mixture that interact less strongly, so they interact very weakly with the stationary phase, those components will travel very, very fast and leave the components that are strongly interactive with the stationary phase behind. So they will come out first. Okay. This will become more clear as you go on with chromatography. I think in my next video of column chromatography, by the way, subscribe if you want to stay tuned for that, will make that much more clear. Okay, on to the next one. If ever asked in an exam to explain exactly how does chromatography work, The best answer is to say chromatography is based on the fact that different components travel at different rates between different phases or separable portions of matter. When passing the dissolved material through a filter agent, the compounds separate into layers as they travel, thereby separating. I just real quick want to add on to that. That's like a 2-mark answer. Okay, remember to look at your mark allocation of your question and try your best to make sure you write down enough information for that amount of marks. In high school, I think it's easier. In university, it's difficult because we don't actually know what they're giving marks for. So add the definition of chromatography. Add what determines the rate at which the components that make up a mixture travel. Add the definition of a stationary phase, a mobile phase. And remember, when it comes to majority of questions, if you're very, very lost and very clueless and don't know what answer to give, the best thing to do is to give a definition. This will most of the time, but not always, you will get a mark for writing just the definition down. It might be 1-2 marks, but you know what? Every single mark counts at the end of the day. So that was a quick exam tip for you. If this video has been helpful so far and you like it so far, give it a like. It pleases the YouTube gods and I live to serve. Okay. Now there are so many different types of chromatography, and each chromatography uses a different type of chemical or a different form, states of matter. So I will be discussing all the types of chromatography that I know, including column chromatography and all of those coming up. So if you want to stay tuned for that, please subscribe. Here is your exam summary. Feel free to pause the video, take a screenshot, copy it down. As long as you use it for your studies, I am happy. I hope you are all well. Best of luck. Hope to see you next time on Reign of Knowledge.